It's not really
Talk shoes.
Recorded live.
Welcome, everybody, and to the Genesis. Where am I? Oh, the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the blacksci-fi.com website. This is your December 18th, the last Friday before Christmas, 2015 edition. And my name is William Hayashi. I'm your host. I'm so extraordinary, we're not going to spend any time talking about me, but tonight's special guest is Patricia Williams. And, Pat, where are you coming from? I forgot to ask where you're living.
I live in Inglewood, California.
Okay, so she lives in Inglewood, California, and for those of you who may have heard the pre-show chatter, she's suffering from the flu. So, you know, I want to thank you for being here because I know how that can be, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I look forward to it. I hope we have a good time talking.
Oh, we will. I as a matter of fact, I take medication to ensure that we have a good time during the show.
Well, look, you're not going to spend the whole show with me laughing at everything you say, right?
Well, no, I won't do that, but I have filler just in case. I even have jokes, but I don't usually have to resort to those. Anyway, what I know about you so far, because I didn't manage, the regular site was down where I do some research, but I do know that you're a writer. Are you a creative in other genres and other mediums as well, or are you predominantly just an author?
Well, predominantly
I don't mean just an author, like, you know.
Yeah, predominantly just an author because basically I have other things I like to do, but they haven't become obsessions. The writing has become an obsession.
And how long ago did you start writing?
I started writing when I was a child, and pretty much that was plagiarizing every story I ever read and putting my own spin on them. And then later, real life comes along and you start to think, well, I'm a grown-up now and I should be being more serious about other things. And I let it go for a while. And then I picked it up again. And then I discovered there was a lot of people inside my head who just wanted me to tell their story. So I had to start putting things down on paper.
Wow. And where did you grow up?
In Louisiana.
And were you there for a while? Did you do a lot of your schooling there, or did you move around?
I lived in Louisiana in a small town called Alexandria for most of my life. As a child, I moved to California when I was 12, and I went to school and a little bit of college here, but I never finished college. It was boring.
Well, I watched a lot of people go, too.
Yeah. Yeah, I always thought school was boring, which made me a very difficult student for the teachers because I loved learning, but I thought homework was for other people. So,
right.
Yeah, school was something I wanted to get through with right away and get to life.
And since you were, you characterize your writing, I guess the writing bug as coming to you early. Are we talking about like in elementary school you started writing and plagiarizing these stories, or as they call it now, they call it fan fiction now?
Yes, it's fan fiction now, but when I was a child there was no such word. So, yeah, it started in elementary school. It got worse in high school as I started, but along with the writing came the obsession to read every book I could possibly get my hands on. So my parents were constantly on my case because I'd rather be inside reading a book than outside with kids doing anything. The book was always more important than socialization, which my parents didn't understand it.
Well, I mean, it's understandable, why they would worry. They want to make sure you're not antisocial. And my parents kind of did the same thing to me, and they over-tested me, too. So anyway, when you're doing all of this reading, were you attracted to a particular genre of stories?
Well, pretty much I was attracted to anything that had to do with space travel and life on other planets and the societies on other planets. I've always always been really focused on what life would be like if we lived on a planet, say, that didn't have the exact Earth-like conditions, and what kind of societies would develop there.
And the not only the scientific, but the sociological accommodations that would have to be made to. Yeah.
Definitely that.
And so, that lends itself to you either being a science or sci-fi fan very, very early. Are we talking about, preteen even?
Yes, preteen even. I as a child, I was always fascinated by horror movies and scary stories, but as I got older, I'd say around 13 or so, I started getting fascinated with science fiction. And all the science fiction shows that were being on television, no matter how poor the quality, because what did I know at 12, were favorites. I loved all of them.
Like name some. Name some of those that were influencing you.
Okay, I watched Star Trek mainly.
Okay,
Star Trek,
sure.
The first time I saw a Star Trek episode was the pilot, and I was gone. That was it for me. I was absolutely taken away with their world. I liked the idea of humanity as a united force going out in the universe, and so Star Trek became my number one fixation. Before that, I had read Asimov and Heinlein, who I particularly love, and the Dragon Rider series, all these stories that took place on other planets and where humanity was developing in different ways.
And for the most part, Heinlein wrote some young adult novels.
I read them all.
But I'm thinking, your taste at that age was mostly, adult themed. Well, not adult themed, but adult level written, work. You know what I mean? It wasn't kid stuff.
Yes.
I read. I forget the author's name, but I was into the Tom Swift series, the Boy Scientist, and Madeleine L'Engle, A Wrinkle in Time, and all of her books. I got to read those, and I really liked those. But my dad was a sci-fi nut, so I'm like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and I'm we have a subscription to Analog or Amazing Tales. I forgot which it was at that year, and all of these books. And so that's how I first did it. But me too, I kind of dialed it in with television as well. Star Trek was huge. The Outer Limits used to scare the pants off of me.
The Outer Limits was a favorite, absolutely.
And even the Twilight Zone, it was more suspense and irony, but still there was enough sci-fi elements in it. There was one that I had a nightmare about. It was about a slot machine that chased a guy out of a window. And then there was the Outer Limits episode called The Xanthi Misfits with Bruce Dern and those stop motion cootie-like creatures. Cooties was that bug thing. And even though they would scare the hell out of me, I couldn't not watch them, They didn't scare me enough to scare me away. Yeah.
Well, I had the kind of, I won't say misfortune, but I was kind of alone in this obsession that I developed so quickly.
Right.
Besides being a big reader, I had no one else in the family who got caught up into the supernatural or the paranormal or the science fiction, none of that. So it was an oddity, and I had no one to relate that to for many years. It was only after high school that I wound up meeting people who had the same idea, and it was very interesting to me that there were so few black people that I knew who had any interests the same as mine. So that was kind of making me kind of stand out as an odd duck, so to speak, with people I knew, because everybody else was into their music or into, their socialization and the civil rights movement and all these other things that were going on that were more important. And they were, and I was involved, but when I had the option for downtime, it definitely had to be a good book, and it definitely had to be science fiction. And so, yeah, it did kind of put me in an odd place, because for a long time during my teenage years, there was no one else that could relate why my interest had gone there. And I think one of the reasons that interest occurred is because I had an odd experience as a baby, and I never forgot it. And I always was curious about who the other people were out there in the universe.
Whoa! Let's. How do you have an odd experience as a baby? I mean, I'm curious. I'm dying to know.
Okay, I remember a lot of my memories from toddlerhood are still with me, and I remember one night waking up in my crib and being aware that something had happened, and I didn't know what it was. And I stood up in the crib, and I knew someone was in the kitchen. My crib was by the kitchen door. And I watched these beings come through the kitchen door and walk through my house and disappear. And I thought, this is pretty scary. And I had no explanation for it. How could I? I was barely out of diapers. I didn't understand what I was seeing, but I knew someone was there. The thing was that later, when I was able to think about this, I realized that the beings did not seem to be aware of me. And as I got older and read more and, got a little more scientific minded, I thought perhaps there had been a dimensional rift, and I was seeing something that wasn't actually happening on the earth plane. So that kind of fueled my fascination with science fiction and limitless possibilities. I'm just as curious about paranormal events and supernatural events as I am about science.
And then, of course, being that age and even reflecting back, excuse me, there's no way to pin down what really happened.
Exactly.
But it was obvious. But obviously, it was pretty significant. I'm a little jealous because when I was standing up in my crib, all I can remember is peeking through the crack in the door, watching the Jack Parr show. So I had a much more mundane crib experience than you did, and every now and then my folks would catch me, but that, it's kind of cool that something like that happened, and you knew it happened, but then you didn't really process it until you were much later, and then you have to you have to go through kind of a self-exploratory period to figure out what was the likely cause. But, that's kind of cool, if in fact it was a dimensional shift or a rift. It kind of boggles the mind that it would have happened. Not that it wouldn't have happened or not that it didn't happen, but as far as an explanation, that's not bad at all. You know what I mean? It's actually logical within the framework of what you experienced.
Right.
Okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, for me, the fact that I never forgot it, I thought was kind of strange because, they talk about how, you don't keep your memories from childhood and babyhood. A lot of memories disappear or, they just become buried. But I never forgot it, and it didn't haunt me or frighten me, but the curiosity it awakened. I remember trying to wake my mother up to tell her there were bad people in the house, and my mom getting up saying, "Oh, you're just having a dream, baby, go back to sleep," But I'm thinking, no, I didn't have a dream. I saw this, and I never forgot it. And then, of course, trying to analyze it years later when I had the education to express it better, and then reading different stories in science fiction that actually made me think maybe it wasn't a dream and it wasn't impossible, that it could be something that had happened or I had witnessed that I wasn't intended to. But, like I said, that moment kind of fueled the passion for discovery and curiosity that I've managed to keep my whole life. I'm never satisfied with a pat answer,
And so you're doing fan fiction at a very young age, writing about the things you see. Was it all like maybe TV and movie sci-fi based, or did you have any portions that were comic book based or anything like that?
Well, I think all kids kind of get into that with comic books because I loved comic books, and, we created our own superheroes there, my cousin and I, for a while. And he was the only other, as my cousin Gilbert got older, he was the only other kid in the family who had a clue where I was coming from, which made us have a really close relationship when we could get together, which wasn't very often because, we wound up living thousands of miles apart. But he had the comic book fascination, and to this day we can still get together and talk about movies and books and things, and it's usually about science fiction or fantasy or whatever because, he can really understand where I'm coming from. So we still have a close relationship based on that.
That's not bad. And in high school, you mentioned that it took a while for you to find other people who were interested in the same thing that you were. Were any of them writers? I mean, did you get some synergy from them from that, or were they just fans of the genre?
Oh, well, during high school, I was pretty much on my own with my fascination.
Okay.
The library at school had a lot of books, but not that much sci-fi. I went to Catholic school. And, I would rather read a good book any day and be entertained than do homework and stuff. It drove my parents crazy. They were always worried about my grades and stuff. And I had friends in school, and we were kind of a multinational little group of friends, but no one who really had that interest in science fiction that I had. So it wasn't pretty much until I got out of high school that I met a few other people who didn't fit the norm, and because of that, I finally hooked up with people who had the same interest. Then, of course, my reading obsession took off even more after that, and then I had to read just about every science fiction book I could get my hands on.
Yeah, and it sounds like you had a pretty good time with the Golden Age authors.
Oh, yes.
The classics.
I love the classics because there was so much adventure. I grew up with, there was Roy Rogers and Dale Evans and Gene Autry and all that on television, lots of cowboys. I love Westerns. And that idea that, there's good guys and bad guys is kind of ingrained on you when you're early in your childhood. It's only later, as you understand through the reality of worldly life, that you get the gray area where it's not black and white and it's not just this way or that way. When it's gray and it's muddled, life teaches you that. And then you have to try to reinvent yourself to deal with where you're not sure why this or why that, or, what judgments you should make aren't clear cut.
Right.
And so I started expanding out from the science fiction, and all the time Westerns had been a great influence on me. So there was that good guy, bad guy idea I had to understand. Now, the Golden Age was really good because there was the good Earth people and the bad aliens, and there was adventure. You go out in space and you meet these terrible things happen, and the good guy always triumphs. And I love those because what kid doesn't? They like to see human beings win the day against the evil aliens, But then over time, you learn that the world isn't that black and white, and people you're taught that are evil aren't necessarily so, but are just the victims of colonization or the victims of religious doctrine or the victims of expansion by some other kingdom. It's all blurred then. You have to really look at it kind of from a reality-based idea. So my writing changed after that. I started really exploring, well, who's to say this person was the enemy? Who's to say they started out as the enemy? Who's to say this culture or this kingdom or this government or this is actually wrong? And you learn. No one's actually right or wrong. There's just all this gray area. And through that gray murk, you have to find out what's the right way or the wrong way, what is appeasing your conscience or what is supporting it. You know, are you convincing yourself you're right or wrong because of something you want or because it's actually truly the way you should be? So writing isn't that easy for me in the sense that it used to be as a child, because it was just this is right and this is wrong. Now as an adult I have to explore my characters and look at all their gray areas and try to realize, well, if this is a whole human being or if they're not human, this whole person, and they've been shaped by their culture and history and war and whatever, you're not going to get this perfect hero character. Everybody's going to be gray.
Right. And so that, it seems like that kind of presents the maturation of your writing, because what you're considering now is the gestalt of experience. You know, what creates a person, what makes a character, what colors a person's life to make them who they are, which seems to be, you know, a much more grown-up way of approaching, you know, the craft of a story, the crafting of a story. And so when do you think you started on that phase of, you know, putting together your stories, really honing, you know, beginning to hone your art as a storyteller?
Well, I think that happened, I'd say, about 1995.
Okay.
Because I was coming out of a relationship. It ended badly. And I was no longer, at that point, rather naive about, you know, people, about life. And so it started to become more important. When I started writing then, after that, it was more to exorcise my demons, so to speak. And in the process, I discovered that the characters became more important than anything. How do you build a complete person on paper so that they're not entirely perfect or not entirely good or bad, but still interesting enough to want to know? So I think from that ending of that relationship is when my writing actually got to be more than just, you know, a fun thing to do to pass the time. When I got serious about it was when I had to explore my own emotions and my own development as a person through my writing.
And so let's go kind of flash ahead to when you know, I'm kind of looking at what you've got here both on Amazon and also on the Mythical Legends page. It was Beneath Cat's Eye your first novel?
Well, you could say that. Beneath Cat's Eye wasn't the first, but it's the first thing that I actually worked on hard enough to get it published. It started out, actually, it wasn't going to be science fiction. It was going to be a complete fantasy. I had thrown all science out the window. And when I sat down and decided I was going to actually work on it to be published, I thought, I can't throw science out the window. I like planet building. I like cultural building. I like to build history for the people on this world. And I thought, so I can't throw out the science. So I decided the science had to be a part of it and, not have it just this impossible things happening with no scientific basis. So I had to go back and rework it.
And the fact of the matter is, if you're world building and not, for me, my first things I published was just kind of an alternate history of where we are now. So it was, the world was built. But when you're doing world building, you have to build an environment and a culture that has some consistency to it, so that even though it may not be completely familiar to other people, at least once they start reading about it, things will be familiar enough in construction, so that there's consistency and understanding. So I could see why you would say, well, screw this. Let's not worry about the science. Let's not worry about that. Let's just tell a story. No. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. But then in the process of crafting a good story, you actually, you have to do some things that build the consistency and things that help people understand the basis for how your beings, how your characters behave. So I think it's interesting that you actually went back and forth on that, because it makes perfect sense to me, especially, if you're talking about a culture. Well, cultures don't just rise up willy-nilly, A good example of our culture where you have to have consistency is here in America, here on our earth, here with human beings. When you go to purchase something and you're using something other than barter, there's a price, okay? So right there has to be some consistency in how you manage your culture, so that you can at least explain to readers in our culture what the consistency of their monetary system is, and how they that whole financial thing. So obviously there has to be some structure. Let's skip that. Tell us a little bit about, you had written other things, but you said that you made a special effort to get this one published. Tell us a little bit about the story. Don't give anything away, but then explain to everybody what it was, the genesis of the story, and then how you got to the point where, what were the things that you recognized that you had to do other than the adding in of the science to make it a publishable work?
Well, CATSEYE started out, like I said, it was going to be just some little thing I just jotted down and just to entertain myself. And when I thought about making it into a novel, I thought, well, no, this is going to need a lot more work. Number one, I started planet building for my Star Trek club I was in years ago, and I enjoyed that. And I thought, well, why don't I just go ahead and create a planet, and from the planet base the culture on conditions on the planet. And then I started thinking about, well, what's the history of these people? How did they get here? And then it evolved from there. I had to figure out a reason why Earth would have these colonies out there. I had to figure out a reason for the colony to develop as it had. And I wound up creating a whole history and a whole planet and a whole star system, and it just exploded. Now, at this point, CATSEYE, even though there's only one book out, will probably be 7, because I have the back history for this is that 7 ships left Earth together to colonize in space. They only had a vague idea of the planet they were heading to. And when they got there, they find out conditions aren't as they were told. And the decisions the people made who were leaders of this expedition had this effect on the planet as well as the colonists, so that 400 years later when CATSEYE opens, you see what those decisions caused, what kind of schisms in the population, what kind of unity happened between others, and that the 7 ships were separated, and how this also affects the development of culture on the planet.
Mhm.
So it wound up becoming a big project, and I have a big, I guess you'd say, a Bible for CATSEYE now. And eventually, after I get the other books published, I'll probably publish the Bible so people can have a real history of this planet, because I intend to do as much history so there'll be a lot of backstory to support, you know, the novels, because the novels are going to be hopefully as full of excitement and adventure, and not so much about what happened in the past, but showing the effects of what happened in the past. So the history will come later.
Well, and that's actually when you talk about crafting an epic like that, where it spans multi-volumes, you know, first of all, you're absolutely right. What came before, which isn't in the story, is just as important as the story, because that's the basis for how you're going to craft your story. And then even though a story may come to an end, unless the universe is somehow destroyed, life will still go on past the story, but you still want to have it at a good ending point.
Right. And also I think to see how these people became what you meet in the novel will be important later. Because I know it'll raise, CATSEYE is going to raise questions of, well, how did this happen? And why did this happen? And the only way to do that is, as I write the stories, I'm also keeping track and expanding the history. And then when the history is published, anyone who is curious about what happened before can go. But the way I'm writing them, my intent is that if you don't go and look at the history, you can still enjoy the stories as they are, you know, because some people may not be that curious.
Well, and a lot of people don't have, or I don't want to say they don't have the skill, but let's say they don't pay close enough attention when they're writing a series. And let's say the second installment of a series, they neglect putting in enough information about the previous book so that people kind of understand the connectivity. Yeah. So, I mean, there's an art to writing a multi-volume saga, and people don't necessarily automatically get it. Some people write, let's say they write a trilogy, basically like it's really just one book, and then they just cut it into 3 pieces.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and see, I can't do that with this because CATSEYE is actually, like I said, there were 7 ships that went out. And so the development of each culture once they got separated on this planet is so radically different. How their societies within the ships and, you know, in the colonies, how they survived and how they evolved. There was no possible way to do this and just say, oh, I can cut this up in 7 parts and publish this. You know, there was no way. And I can't keep track of all these characters and their histories if I did not build the Bible right along with writing the story.
Yeah, there's definitely an art to that. Okay, so give us a little background about the universe that you've created.
Okay, I think what is pretty obvious today is the Earth is suffering under climate change. Governments are rising and falling really fast. We seem to be headed toward a place where there's just going to be nothing but chaos, and war is not decreasing but increasing. So looking to the future, I'd say that there would become a time when a fractured Earth with all these upheavals and natural upheavals would come to the point that I think corporations, big business, would be on a level equal to government or even stronger than government, because we're already a materialistic society, and we're moving toward that where materialism is more important than anything else. Spiritual values, human values are rapidly disappearing under the weight of the greed and government intervention, on the ordinary person. And I think ordinary people are starting to feel more and more helpless. We can't protect ourselves. We can't make our voices heard. And I think sometime in the future that would be an effect, that the world governments and the corporations would get together and say, hey, you know what? We can still do good around here if we just get rid of everybody who doesn't like the way we're doing things. So that's the basis of CATSEYE, is that the colonists, most of them wouldn't be people who were looking forward to going out into space, but people who were desperate to escape life here on Earth to what it has become.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but that's the basis of CATSEYE, is that the colony ships go out, and they going out with hope for better lives. And only after they arrive, in this particular case, at this particular destination, do they discover that the promise made to them was not exactly true. And the people have to deal with the fact that they are pretty much gone out as far as they can go. They are essentially stranded with no way at that point to create the technology to get them back here. So they have to make life what they can where they are. And that includes terraforming the planet, which has other ramifications that they were not expecting.
It's a great... go ahead, I'm sorry.
So what it basically is, the book Beneath CATSEYE opens 400 years after these events, and it's giving you a peek at what societies have developed in the course of that 400 years. And I don't want to say anything more because
No, don't give it away. No, you don't want to give it away.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, there's this, I think there's a lot more dystopian themed speculative fiction than any other kind. And, I think it's born of a certain reality that we all live looking at what's going on around us.
Exactly.
And figuring out a way to cope, whether here or getting away or running away, with the trilogy I wrote, I had African Americans who were sick and tired of America leave the planet in today's history, because they don't, not only do they not see any purpose in staying, but they don't see any purpose in trying to change it, because there's so much arrayed against change. There's so many forces that are fighting against change. You look at, let's just take a really ugly example. All of these white cops who are killing black folks, there are two major forces, three major forces that are behind that. One is historical. This has been going on since 1619, and most people don't realize it. There's been no change since 1619 when the first Blackfoot hit the American shore.
Well, I think that's a point to be made, that people, because of the civil rights movement, people have convinced themselves that things are better. Many people have. They've convinced themselves, but they don't realize that everything on Earth cycles. You may have a period of high development materially, and it seems like there's more humanity, but that cycle goes around back to what it was before, when there's racism and hatred, which was always there. But people had put it out of their minds that says, we fixed the problem so it won't happen again. They don't realize that it isn't laws on the books. It isn't media giving out a positive message or a negative one. It's the fact that we, as human beings, don't want to be changed. We don't want to be better human beings. We want what we want. We are greedy and selfish a lot of the times and at the expense of other human beings, and that's what happens. And if our great-grandfather hated black people, or our great-grandfather hated somebody else, or hated women, or hated whoever, then we're happy to do what our great-grandfather did, or our great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. We are human beings. We are not flawless. We are not perfect. We are full of negative emotions. I'm not saying we're not full of positive things, because people do good and labor for good every day. But essentially, as human beings, we're never satisfied with the status quo. It's either good or bad from the viewpoint of the person experiencing it, and therefore no one's ever satisfied.
Well, and if
we go for the idea that, okay, we're going to get on this colony ship and we're going to go live the life we want to live, okay? But when we get there, experiences will change what we want. Some people, it'll just be strictly to survive at all costs. Some people will really have this dream that they're going to build a perfect society where everybody's happy, everybody's respected, everybody's loved, we take care of each other. It's all going to be this perfect, perfect world. But the reality is people aren't perfect, and we want what we want when we want it. And if it's at the expense of someone else, that's the way it has to be. So there's no perfection to be found in our earthly existence. There's no reason not to strive for the perfection, but we're not going to find it unless all of a sudden every human being everywhere is suddenly elevated in thought and becomes something more. And that, I think, is going to take a very, very long time for human beings to attain. And you're going to have human beings who don't want that.
Well, I don't think we're going to make it. I mean, let's put it this way. You know, ever since 1983, the powers that be across the globe have done their best to force the concept into everybody's consciousness that greed is good and that it's every man or woman for themselves.
For themselves, exactly. And that's the world we're living in now.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. And the thing is, I honestly don't think, and I think this goes back to the whole dystopian tendency, the tendency for dystopian speculative fiction, science fiction, and future history, because very few people are able to see a way out of it, because the weight of powers arrayed against sanity are huge. For example,
yes.
you have Congress, you have state houses, you have governors, you have the whole infrastructure of the United States of America, the controlling infrastructure of the United States of America, is designed to protect and further enrich just 400 families. Only 400 families. They have no other. They have no other guidance, no other focus except to keep enriching, the top 400 families in this country.
But I think you can say that for every world government is all about supporting itself, keeping itself in power, keeping that power in as few hands as possible, and not letting any of that power trickle down to the so-called common people.
I agree.
When you have to worry about putting food on the table for the children you have, to take care of the wife you have or the husband you have or whatever, and the extended family, you don't have time to be worried about what the government's doing, even though the government is undermining your ability to do these things for your family. We understand this. governments work for the benefit of governments and very seldom for the people. You know, we like to exercise our right to vote, and we like to exercise our ability to be able to walk out in the street and protest when we don't like something. That is more than many other governments allow their people to do. So we can blow off steam and we can work for it to be better. Whether or not it becomes better, we can at least go back and say, well, I tried. Other people don't get that option to even make that attempt. But the bottom line is, the bottom line is people, we're all flawed. So my idea of what is best for humanity isn't going to be my next door neighbors or my own sons or, you know, my daughters. Everybody's going to look at what's best for humanity is based on their own judgment and experience. It's rare we can actually work together for the benefit of all and have it come out where someone isn't hurt, crushed, or ignored in the process.
Yes, all of that is true. And you know, we could discuss sociology and society forever. But the cool part is that you've decided to take where we are now, extrapolate into the future, and look at the possibilities of how things can evolve in a different direction. And that's the essence of a lot of the future history that we have. When you look at how you're crafting your universe, do you see, you know, and this is just a personal reflection, you know, for you, do you see and do you like to write about the possibility of man rising up against its baser instincts and actually coming through on some of the promise of what humanity is supposed to be like? And when I say what it's supposed to be like, I mean like the writings of religions about, you know, caring about the least of us and things like that. You know, supposedly, you know, the United States being the land of the free and the home of the brave, and, you know, we don't leave anybody behind, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see the possibility of us winning to that perspective rather than kind of being stuck in the in really almost like the dire straits that we're in now? So are you looking, I guess what I'm asking is, when you write, do you write toward the positive, or, you know, are you more dystopian, like let's say Blade Runner? You know what I mean? Well,
I think I'm sort of in the middle on that. My idea is that in small groups, and I don't mean nations of millions and billions, I mean in small groups of people, you
like
can...
communities. Community
right,
size?
Community-sized groups of people, you can build a society that could probably benefit most of the people there. You know, I mean, in the sense that you can provide the health care, you can provide the education, you can provide the opportunities, and then people can aspire and rise above their most basest, you know, emotions and abilities, and they can do something productive and support that community. I think when that community becomes millions of people, and you have to have representatives of the people come in, and, you know, you have so few representing many, there's no way to avoid people being left behind, overlooked, or marginalized, you know, because you cannot stop the greed, you cannot stop the pride, you cannot stop the arrogance of humanity. It comes with all the good we are. The bad comes with it. And the least of our abilities to balance that out is why we have so much trouble. We don't have the ability to recognize when we're being arrogant or prideful, you know, or greedy or lustful. We usually ignore the warnings when that's happening to us, and just pursue what we desire. So in that process, you lose and you leave people behind that you may have cared for in a smaller group. So for me, in CATSEYE, I'm looking at what happened when this group that went out together were fractured and how the societies of each group developed because they were separated, and the good and bad that occurs in each group, because some of them developed quite interesting civilizations and really were not very Earth-like in their form of government or anything. And then others devolved.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get elevated. They didn't become something more. They became something less. So it just depends on, when you get a group of people who start out like-minded, you have a better chance of building a society, true enough. But when that society grows to a point that it doesn't support the opinions of all the people, and how is that possible? You can't have millions of people and everybody expressing how they feel without somebody saying, look, we need some organization here. We need to have representatives come. Then you start a government.
Well, and that is true. And here's the thing. Let's take Europe, for example, because we have entire countries that are the size of states. And a lot of those countries, they manage to eke out a better existence, a more humanistic existence, a more compassionate and caring existence, because at their heart, with some exceptions, they don't have to deal with a much, much bigger populace. When you have a bigger populace, it's exactly like, you have to create a bureaucracy. And when you create a bureaucracy, you diminish the amount of attention, care, and compassion that you can give to your populace, because it can't think in community-sized numbers. It has to think in an overall millions and millions and millions capacity. So I think it makes, what you've done is you've created a really cool environment where you can explore the vagaries of differing conditions for society. And what I find compelling and cool about it is you do it in the framework of science fiction, where you're creating different environments to shortcut the sociology by imposing the environmental need. For example, if you talk about a generational ship and all these people who are on the ship, you have a very, very closed environment, and they have to learn how to, live together, and, that presupposes the kinds of societal rules that you're going to have. If they land on a planet that needs terraforming and they are all, 100% invested in their survival, then you have another situation where the focus is staying alive for everybody. So you can't have one person leaving the screen door open on the airlock and forgetting and letting all the air. I think that what it does is you've created many, or you have the capacity to create many crucibles for different parts of society and different types of societies to interact and do what it is that they have to do in order to stay alive. And within that structure, there's a lot of room for a lot of stories. So that definitely explains why you could easily span seven novels, 7 volumes.
Right. Well, like I said, I'm not sure if it'll be 5 or 7. It depends. But I noticed, I gave myself this option. I made the planet as inhospitable as I could, because I knew environment does affect how societies develop. So that's one count against these group of people that have come here, the environment. The initial terraforming was done supposedly before they got there. Additional terraforming had to be done after they arrive. And they get some very upsetting surprises when they do make landfall.
Okay.
So I've set them up in conditions that will affect all their societies. But then you have the societies, like you said, on board a ship, things run smoothly because they have to. There's vacuum. If you don't do what you have to do, if you don't follow the rules, that's death. There's no way out of that.
Yeah.
Some of that culture can remain with some of the people, and some of that culture may be thrown completely away. But everybody will develop different depending on the circumstances where they are. And yes, I'm not working with one big giant community still together. You know, this is smaller groups to explore what the changes they experienced in the past have caused, what effect these changes have caused. And so, yeah, it's just smaller communities that I can explore how they developed and what the people have become.
I think that's great. And then, go ahead.
On a larger scale, I wouldn't be comfortable for me as a writer because I couldn't explore the characters and the cultures when you've got, I'm dealing with the whole planet Earth. That just wouldn't have worked for me.
Yeah, it's a very broad canvas, and you can't really get down to the real detail. I was going to ask you, with your characters and in your universe, does race play a factor in the story or in the stories?
Race plays a factor in the stories in the sense that there was a schism among the colonists and the military on one ship, and you could say that schism turned out to be a racial one in the sense of who the majority of the colonists were and who the majority of the military were. So in that one sense, yeah, there was a racial component, but it pretty much was a question of survival of everyone there, not so much that, race is why there was the schism. It wasn't so much race was the schism, but the way the numbers of the colonists were on this particular ship, it does appear to be drawn on racial lines, definitely.
And what about, if they're drawn on racial lines, and the reason why I ask this is because, this is kind of like the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, which is a service of the blacksci-fi.com website. See how I threw that little station identification in there? But see, the thing is I'm curious because it's always interesting to me to see how black writers deal with racial politics, because it's as much of our existence as anything else. And it affected my writing. It affects a lot of the people I know, a lot of the writers, the creators, filmmakers, artists. It affects their worldview and their output. So I was kind of curious if you see that see racial politics or race as an essential component to the crafting of your story. Like for me, it's the central tenet of my story. But other people, it's an aside, or maybe even racial politics causes a racial divide between two or more, races, and then that the friction or the conflict, kind of tells the story. So I was just curious about how that plays in such an epic story that can span the volumes.
Well,
that you mentioned, 5 or go ahead.
Okay, in the first book, in Beneath CATSEYE, like I said, the main ships that are involved in this particular story, when the schism happened, it wasn't so much about racism as about being human, period. And so what worked out was that everybody who left, they broke up along racial lines.
Yeah.
The colonists who escaped the ship, who escaped the military, they break themselves up along racial lines, and I don't think of it as intentional, at least in the question of two groups. One group definitely left because they felt they were superior to all the other races of color, and they separated themselves based on that. For me, myself personally, I never could quite get an understanding for why people drew racial lines. I mean, we're all human beings. Our blood is all red. We all breathe the same air. We're human. Man creates his own prejudices, his own racial lines, his own attitudes about everything, and makes his own boundaries. We created this artificial boundary between us as human beings. Oh, well, you're black or you're white or, or you are Indian or you're this or that. We're all, you're Chinese, you're Japanese,
right.
You're Korean, you're something. We draw the line. We don't see ourselves as all humans. We see ourselves as whatever makes us stand out. Our facial features, our religions, whatever.
Well, let me just go ahead and piss everybody off. We weren't like that, and no, this is true, and only the stupid people out there are not going to understand this. I love saying stuff like that because somebody's going to get mad at me anyway. But here's what happened: that didn't happen until men. Women ruled all our civilizations on Earth up until somewhere between 10,000 and 5,000 years ago, and then men got tired of it because testosterone makes you stupid, and men invented organized religion. And when men invented organized religion, that's when the schisms happened. That was when we all of a sudden had in-group, out-group exclusions. That was when we started having the divides. That was when we started having conflict. We didn't have, multi-generational wars until men invented organized religion. And people are going to get pissed off at me, but you know what? Men invented gods. Men invented gods. Okay, yes, there was mysticism associated with nature. There was mysticism associated with the lights in the sky at night. There was mysticism about all of that. But it's only when men on this earth, around the globe, created organized religion that all of this nonsense started. And what's truly tragic is the revisionist history that anybody wants to put out there that that's not true. The revisionist history that says, well, Jesus Christ is the one Lord. Oh, no, then we got Allah. Oh, no, then we have, and the fact of the matter is when you have that many people claiming that many gods, that many religions, that many inciting incidents for religion, obviously that's an invention of man. I don't give a damn what anybody says. So you're right. We did not originally start out being selfish. We didn't originally start out being bigoted. We didn't originally start out being prejudiced. We didn't start out not caring about other people's children living or dying. But
no,
the influence of testosterone brought us to where we are today. Okay? Excuse the expression. It's gross and disgusting. But when all of these men decided that all of life had to be one big dick-waving contest, I think that was the entree to the decline of what we could be, the good things that we could be as humans. Now, people are going to argue with me, but unfortunately I've done the study. I've done the work. I've done the research. And there are a whole lot of people out there who are smarter about this than some of the people that I consulted. But you're right. What you've done is you set up a creative universe where it appears that your people in your creative universe are trying to overcome this condition that we've been forced into for thousands of years to try to find the betterment of what we could be. And it's tough. I like to think that I'm a good person, but you know what? I don't have any problem with, this year and next year becoming a part of the 1%, because what it does is it insulates me from nonsense. But that doesn't mean I don't care about other people,
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what happens here is that human beings want to shape God or the creative force behind our existence into what they want God to be. instead of
exactly.
what God is. You know, the bottom line is, and every religious leader, and I don't mean religious in the sense that we usually use it, I mean a spiritual leader. A spiritual leader, whether they're Druid, whether they're Buddhist, whether they're Hindu, I don't care. Every spiritual leader of the people of this planet knows that God is essentially love. The creative force behind us is love. The reason we are here is love, and our purpose is to love. Men decided to draw lines and say what God is. They never feel God. They want to understand him. That's not our job. Our job is to feel God and live the love he gave to us by putting us here. That's our purpose as human beings. But we decided that, oh, no, I'd rather hate John because he's not the same color as me. I'd rather hate Sue because she's better looking than I am. I'd rather hate Mary and all her children because they don't have as much money as me. And why don't they? She must be this, she must be that. We spend so much time judging each other for what we decide we aren't that we have stopped looking for the good in each other.
Well, and look at current, the current events right now. Right now we have an entire media industry trying to turn this country against a religion.
Exactly,
the Muslim religion.
Exactly.
Okay.
I am very,
very
much opposed to that. I'm very much opposed to what they're doing because essentially they're ignoring, just like us, the ordinary people who go about their job every day, go to the temple, worship God in his true form, and try to live the best they can and love each other and go about their lives in peace. The media only focuses on the extremists in every religion. The extremists are always what makes the media, what makes the news. And people in America, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for this, are so lazy and so refuse to educate themselves on what really is going on the real history, on the real conditions in the world. They take everything that's said on the news show at night as complete 100% the truth, and nothing is completely the truth.
Well, you're right, but here I'll tell you one thing where we fail, where we pretend, where we dissemble. But, everybody's talking about in the media radicalized Islamists. But how about the radicalized Christianists in this country who are pulling off these mass murdering sprees every single – do you know that because in the statistics that 80 people a day are killed by gun violence? And it's not all
and they're
black
trying
people,
to trying to say that you don't need gun control here, but I'm an average citizen. What do I need to go in a gun store for and buy an AK-47? I'm not going to buy an AK-47 to go home and protect my family. I'm going to use that gun to go out and do harm to other people. You can't tell me there's a difference between you thinking, well, I have to keep a handgun in the house because I live in a bad neighborhood, to I need an AK-47 and ammunition and rockets. I mean, come on. Let's seriously think this.
Exactly. And people are just stupid, okay? Fortunately, certain people are not in the chat room, but I'm going to repeat this. You look at the distribution of IQ in men, women, everybody on Earth, and half of the curve is to the left, half the curve is to the right, top dead center is average, which means half the people on this planet are of subnormal IQ. Some people don't think that that's significant. I think it's significant because there are people who are so stupid, they're just dumb as dog crap. But the fact of the matter is, all of these fictions, all of these excuses, all of this stuff that is pretty much just media-driven or at least financially driven. Let's sell more guns. Let's keep, these people voting for these dumbass guys who are on the Republican side of the presidential field. Let's keep the people who love them happy by being bigoted, by being misogynistic, by, you know, all of these things that people use to divide each other. And you know, what recourse do we have when the media does that? Well, I think stories play a good role in it. If you can get a movie made, you know, that makes it accessible to other people to tell a different story. But it's tough overcoming what the, quote, conventional wisdom, unquote, narrative is in this country in order to get people to realize their higher purposes or to actually care about each other. So, you know, we tell stories to try to bring attention to things, but there is so much media arrayed against, you know, a humanistic concern for other people that it's just sad.
Well,
it's just
I
sad.
agree with you. I agree with you on that. There are movies coming out constantly that address all the issues people don't want to deal with, and when it pops up in their daily life, they have no education in this situation to deal with these things rationally. I, for one, have never been able to understand why people have so much trouble with race, with gender, you know, with sexuality, with all these things that they find reasons to kill and beat each other up over every day. I've never understood it. It's not been where I didn't come here that way. My head doesn't twist around that way. My biggest problem for myself, I discovered that I was prejudiced against people that were prejudiced about anything. Because to me...
Well, that's just good sense. That's good sense. That's not prejudice.
Because to me, the individual, I'm not looking at the body. What is the spirit inside of you? Who are you? I want to know that more than I want to know whether you're gay or straight, whether you're male or female, or whether you're not even gender specific. All of those things are irrelevant to who you are. That's what I like to explore in my stories. Who are these people? Not what they are, but who are they? The individual. What kind of person are you growing to be? So, you know, the prejudice is just, that's to me is like a sideline to deal with. Racism is a sideline to all the other issues you may have as an individual. Are you selfish or greedy or arrogant? You know, all of those things are more important to me than, you know, whether the society itself. The thing is, we've decided that the collective mind is the way we want it to be. Even though individuals in that mind may be thinking different and knowing they don't have the power to get their agenda on the table, keep quiet about it. You know, but they're thinking it, they're just not standing up for it.
Well, my writing is focused on social justice. You know, I write about issues that help us look at the things that are wrong and maybe a way, not necessarily the way of moving forward, but a different way of looking at it so that we could even discuss it. And I think that's a laudable focus for what I write, to tell stories that incite conversation, you know, incite consideration that we don't normally give certain issues. Do you find yourself writing for that purpose as well? Do you explore those themes that hopefully will get people, because it sounds like you do, that will get people thinking in a different mode about how we live our lives and where we may be falling short and where we could be better at doing so? Is that kind of a core component of you exploring culture in your writing?
Well, it is in a way to explore humanity and the way humanity develops under different circumstances. And, to look at the way we are falling short, and then to look at the way we become more than just, you know, our base desires. But I don't feel that I hammer anybody with an agenda. I feel like I present the characters, and then whatever the individual gets when they read the story, what they get out of it is up to them. I don't consider that I'm presenting a political, agenda. I'm just telling how these people turned out after all the experiences their ancestors went through. And this is who they are,
And letting the story tell itself.
Right. And if you find them offensive, well, that's on you. But I'm not going to retract anything I've written. I'm not going to try to pretend human beings are something more than we are. So I'm not going to avoid questions of sexuality, of prejudice, of gender issues or any of these things. I'm not going to run away from that because we are all of these things, good and bad.
Right.
So I don't think my writing will please everyone, but then I'm not writing to please everyone. I'm writing to please me.
Well,
so
okay, but that begs the question. Oh, go ahead. No, please continue.
Yeah, my bottom line is that I enjoy the people I've created. They are more than just figments of my imagination to me.
Yeah.
I mean, Brightlands is a real woman. Talon is a real man. They exist, and I believe somewhere out in the universe on a planet, some people like this must be there. Else why would they pop up in my head? So in my fantasy that James is going to serialize soon, I was always a big Conan fan, Robert E. Howard fan. I loved all his writings. Regardless of who people say he was in his personal life is irrelevant to me. So when we get on the subject of racism or whatever, we know he had prejudices. But I loved his stories, and so I wrote as kind of, a dedication to him, kind of my own versions of these barbarians. And they're quite murderous and sexual and whatever. But this is man is at his most primitive. Well, not at his most primitive. We're not going back to the caves, but, the bottom line is these are people who had to survive at all costs and did not care about the cost to others that they survived, And then in my Western, Beneath Red Tail Wings, I write about someone who experienced war and suffered really terribly from it, and how his character develops and who he becomes because of it. And maybe there's a hint of salvation for this broken soul later. So I'm really more concerned about the individual than I am about the whole society or the millions and millions. My writing is pretty focused on the person.
Yeah, and that, let's see. I was going to jump to the Western. Tell us a little bit. For you to write the sci-fi kind of focused Beneath CATSEYE, and then going into a Western. What I'm curious because it's unusual to see those two kind of genres back to back. Tell us a little bit about what was the impetus for Beneath Red Tail Wings.
Well, Red Tail Wings started out as just, I wrote it many years ago, the first version, and it was just, the cowboy is out and he has an adventure and he gets the girl at the end and they ride off in the sunset and everything is wonderful. And then 10 years later, I pulled this old yellow sheet of paper out and says, oh, my goodness, I don't remember I even wrote this. But I was a different person then. I was practically a kid. I was naive. I was still looking at life through rose-colored glasses, and now I'm not. And so what happened was I happened to run across an article about the lives of sailors in the 1800s here in America, and about, the hijacking of men to crew the sailing ships. And it really touched me and broke my heart to read how these men suffered, and no one was doing anything to protect the sailors. And it's sort of connected because most of this takes place during the 1800s in all the major ports of the country, and it didn't matter race or whatever for crewing the sailing ships. People were kidnapped, farmers, bankers, whoever they could get their hands on were hijacked and put on these ships to work, and most of them didn't survive it. So that kind of connected with me in such a way that I thought maybe I can rework this old Western story and connect the two. And so I did. So the character in the story, Matt, comes from Maryland. He goes through the Civil War. He turns out to be what I guess people would call a loner, and how he winds up having all these different experiences that leads him to what hopefully will be a better life for himself. I can understand some people, if they read it, thinking, well, one guy couldn't go through all of this. But if you pay attention to news even today, you know some people in the world are living through horrors we can't even express, and they survive. But who you are when you survive at the end of that, won't be the way you started out, for good or bad.
Right.
And so in Matt, I explore what has become of someone who's had so many bad experiences, he could just give up on life. Just give up altogether. And through him, I explore how in the process of trying to heal himself, he gets a little hope at the end of possibly having some peace in his life.
Mm-hmm. And let me ask you this: when obviously you didn't live in Western times, what kind of research did you do to kind of get all of that in your head so that you could kind of craft the story that you wanted?
Well, I've always been fascinated by the Indian Wars, the Civil War. That time period in history has always been great fascination for me. I've got a big collection of books on the subject. I check out a lot of books from the library on the subject. I wasn't aware too much of the life for the sailing, the men on the sailing ships as much, but I ran across a book in the library one day and thought it was interesting and just picked it up to read because, like I said, I read pretty much anything if it catches my interest. And that surprised me that I was actually going to be able to connect that story, these events for these men on the sailing ship, with the person in my story who had survived the Civil War and all the suffering he endured at the schism of his family and everything, and able to tie them together to tell the story of both and give people a little bit of insight on that life wasn't all cut and dried. We think, well, sure, we didn't have modern conveniences, but some people really think life was better in the old days than it is now. And the fact that life has never been better in any age, because we're still essentially human beings and we still do the same things to each other.
Right.
We still are horrible to each other as much as we, if not more so, than we're ever good to each other. And so it was really amazing to me that I was able to redo this story and have a different perspective on it. I'm a much more jaded individual than I was, say, 25 years ago. So I told Matt's story, and I felt like I really tapped into his suffering, his suffering from the after effects of war, his guilt, and everything that defined him and isolated him from, people in the general population. So I think in Matt, anyone who's gone through trauma or through a war would be able to connect with him.
Right, relate to him, his experiences.
Right. I think that's possible. Even though I've never been in a war zone, I think I did really a good job in tapping into the spirit of what he endured.
But I mean, even though you haven't been, I mean, I'm curious how do you research something that's that foreign to your own personal existence? I think people would kind of want to know what it takes for you to get to that state of mind.
Well, for one thing, I knew a few people who had been in Vietnam.
Sure.
And we talked about their experiences when they came home, what they went through. I did a lot of research on, the medical conditions, the after effects of war, not just the physical, but the mental.
Right.
I've always been fascinated by World War II. Actually, the history of World War II is kind of an obsession. So, and World War I, particularly the flyers, the pilots in World War I. And so, like I said, I have lots of books, and I do lots of research, and I do talk to people, and I try to put myself in their shoes, to have that empathy, to understand what they've endured, and especially to see someone rise above everything that should have beaten them down and still be a loving human being after that, instead of so insulated and isolated that they don't have a human connection.
Right. Okay, so are those the only two, or the two books that you have out right now, or do you have more?
No, those are the only two out right now. And
okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And like I said, James is going to serialize the fantasy story that's coming up. And I'm working on CATSEYE. Yes, I am, James. I'm working on it. And so
and so people know that's James Jones of Mythical Legends Publishing, and he's your publisher now, your primary publisher.
Yes.
Okay, so he's got two of your books, and you're about to serialize another story.
Yes, my fantasy novel is going to be serialized. I'm not sure if James is using the original title, which is "Do Not Wake the Beast," or "Amber Trails." It's either one of the two. I'm not sure which title he's going to use.
Yeah, it's funny because that first one is what I had on my my door in my apartment when I was in college.
Well, it's actually true for the story, because you don't want to wake the beast. Absolutely.
Hey, it was actually true in college too, girlfriend. But anyway, I mean that's kind of cool because it looks like you've got a certain amount of longevity. Doing a serial is nice because it exposes you to a lot of people, and I presume that's going to be in in the magazine Tachyon Node. It'll be serialized.
Yes.
Okay. So we have that to look forward to. Both of your others are available either from Mythical or Amazon, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So other than the story that's going to be serialized, are you in the process of working on other novels?
Well, I'm working on the next CATSEYE book, actually.
Okay.
And I'm hoping to have that finished rather soon. Yes, James, sooner than later, because I had some editing work and stuff I was doing that I've completed, so I'll have more time for my own writing now. And
go ahead.
Oh, well, the next book for CATSEYE will be about two of the ships that were separated from the group, and how they came to meet the people from the first two ships. So so there's a connection. These groups are going to come together, and it's not going to be an easy reunion because the first ship certainly was schismed and certainly has three separate populations that aren't that are attached diplomatically but no longer consider themselves one group. And so, yeah, these people who are going to come in the second book are more like still crew. They're still living their lives pretty much based on like life would have been in space when they were traveling. The cultures that have developed on the planet will be totally radically different from what they're going to expect to see. So I think there's an opportunity for much strife and further disruption in their lives. You know, when their people split up.
So everybody's got that to look forward to.
Definitely.
And let me ask you about your process, because, you know, people kind of want to know how other people write. What is your, you know, when you're in the process of crafting a novel, do you do it by schedule? Do you do it by whim when you feel like it? Are you able to just sit down and actually buckle down and work at will? Tell us a little bit about your process in writing.
Well, you know, when I first started getting serious about writing, I did all the things beginners do. I got all the books. I subscribed to all the writing magazines. I tried to do the outlines. I tried to plan everything. None of that actually worked for me. You know, it doesn't work. For me, sometimes I can sit down and start something and I think, oh, well, I'm going to work on CATSEYE today, right? And I'll start typing, and then I'm not typing CATSEYE. I'm typing something else altogether. It's a whole different story. So for me, it's pretty much I have to wait until everybody in my head starts yelling, me, me, me. It's my turn now. Because if I sit down and try to make myself do it, then I start writing everything else but my intention of working, what I was intending to work on. So it pretty much is like that. It's whimsical. It comes in a rush, you know, and then I might not be able to write anything for days, and then I'll get a rush, and then I can't do anything but stay up all night and write for 2 or 3 days straight until I fall over. It is not planned and organized like, you know, like the books tell you it's supposed to be. It doesn't work like that for me at all. So it's chaos, actually.
Well, there's nothing wrong with chaos, because obviously you get the job done. You know, out of your chaos comes a certain amount of order.
Yes, which always surprises me.
Yeah, and is writing for you a singular existence, or do you have people who you share your work with when you're in progress, or...
Well, you know, I talked to Kenneth Strickland and James Jones about my writing pretty much these days. We've been talking to each other about our writing for many years when we got together on the USS Shadow Star and started writing stories for our Star Trek club. And, I mean, that's, you know, continued through the years. So we bounce ideas off of each other, we expand, and, you know, we get correction and guidance from each other, and it works out really good. I'm always really, really happy when some idea I've had sparks that thing, and the guys go, oh, wow, I want to write a story about that, you know. So I like to think I, you know, give everyone a different perspective on a story so they can maybe get a new twist in there, a new angle that they hadn't considered before.
Well, I mean, that's the essence of interesting storytelling. You know, you want people to get invested. You want them to have not only a good sense of a great story, but there, you know, it's always good when you can invoke a sense of wonder about your writing too. Give me a little, or give us a little bit of an idea of what kind of feedback have you gotten from these first 2 books, or is one came out in 2013, so it's been a little bit of time. Tell us a little bit about how your story has been received.
Well, I think with CATSEYE, I think people aren't really sure what to make of it. I mean, I have an alien presence in the book, and I'm sure, say some readers might read it and be offended. And then others might think, oh, well, it reads like a pretty typical adventure story to me, and not really think it's that big a deal. I think it just depends on the individual who's reading it. I've not had any really critical or scathing comments about it. I know people have read it and who haven't commented pretty much at all except to say, oh, I liked it. So I'm not so much worried about the thoughts that people have about it. I can sit down and read it again and again and be happy. So
well, okay, but
I'm pretty much not worried about it.
I'm going to put whoa. I'm going to play devil's advocate. Okay, because here's the deal. Did you or did you not write it for, a certain amount of financial gain? Obviously, you had an investment in the story. Obviously, you sound like you're very happy with the way the story turned out. But don't you want to sell the book?
I would love for the book to sell. I would love somebody to come along and say, this would be a great anime and I want to do this, and offer me the deal. That would be great. But the other side of that is I didn't write it to make money, was not my prime motivation.
Ooh,
I wrote it.
Your publisher is not going to want to hear about that.
Well,
go ahead, please.
I wrote what I'm saying. Wrote the story before I even thought about publishing it. But the prime motivation was that these personalities wanted to be expressed. I did it for them, which sounds crazy to most people, but I did it for them. Bright Lance wanted her story told, Talon wasn't that happy about it, but, well, if you got to do it, you got to do it,
Right.
So I write for the joy of it, not because I'm going to be sitting around worried about, well, if I'm ever going to make money off this piece. The joy of writing is what I do it for.
Yeah. We all say that. But you know what? If that's absolutely true, then write a damn diary. See, you're not writing a diary. I mean, you're writing.
Well, but my life is so it's such a dull life. I mean, why would I write my diary and put that out there for publication?
But what I'm saying is, when writers tell me that, they go, "Oh, I don't write for anybody else. I just write for myself." And I go, "Then why didn't you keep it to yourself?" No, I think we all want to have a certain amount of validation about what we create, and I think that's why I
like to have somebody come and say, hey, I read this and it was really good and it sparked an idea for me, and then I wrote this because your story excited me, and because of you I wrote something. I think that would be marvelous. That would be marvelous if I got somebody thinking, hey, well, if she can do this, I can do this, and we get more writers out there, and I think that would be great, because I think writing is a good exercise for releasing all your thoughts, your anxieties, your ire. I do my best writing when I'm miserable and I'm angry. That's when a good story usually comes out of me, when I'm not happy. So that's just one of the things that, you say, well, you wouldn't want to be unhappy every day, but that's when the best stuff gets written.
Well, it's one of the strongest emotions that we deal with on a more regular basis, my writing, a lot of my writing is born of rage, and it's a tough line to walk for me, because when I write, I don't want that rage to show up in the story. I don't want them to go, oh, that's an angry Japanegro who wrote that, and he's just mad about stuff. Well, I'm being honest.
I understand what you mean, because I wrote Do Not Wake a Beast at a time in my life when I was really angry, and there was nothing that gave me greater satisfaction than when Ulrich was pounding somebody in the ground with his double-bladed battle axe, okay? So, yes, I do understand that. But, I still think I wound up, when I went back and read this, I said, wow, this is pretty exciting. I could read this again. So, yeah, this personal satisfaction and personal ego here, I'm not making apologies for that.
You shouldn't.
And when James says, hey, you know what, I think this should be published, I said, okay, do whatever you want. But I just feel like all my stories are very personal to me, because there is no way that I'm not attached to them at some emotional level. There is part of me being experienced by someone who reads them, and then through that discovery, they may realize that, hey, I'm not the only one out here feeling like this or experiencing this. And so we're all connected as human beings, and if that's what my stories do, that, to me, would be the greatest satisfaction, that somebody would realize they're not isolated in the world.
And that's important, especially for young adults, because you have this disassociation with a lot of teens when they feel like, well, nobody knows what I'm feeling. I'm going through this thing, and I look around me, and nobody looks like me, nobody's acting like me. I can't imagine anybody feeling like me. Excuse me. But then when they discover something in a story that, oh, my God, somebody wrote something about feelings that I'm feeling, or a character that behaves the way I do, there's more than validation. There's a certain understanding that they're not so alone. So that's a pretty cool thing when you can inspire somebody else, and then to inspire them to further go and write something on their own. I think that's the pinnacle of kind of the appreciation of what you could have for what you have done. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I feel like in both the main stories. In Beneath CATSEYE, I have a group of people who stand out in the story because they are quite frightening to be around. And then there are people who consider themselves pure human, and, they should be perfect like they are, and resent this genetic intervention that has taken place.
Right.
And then in Matt's story, in Beneath Red Tail Wings, I've got this man who is so guilt-ridden about so many decisions he's made. And how many of us have gone through that? We can't go back and change what has happened or been done, but we have to live with the decisions we've made, and sometimes the guilt is overwhelming. And so I think Matt would touch someone who've experienced that same feeling. Beneath Red Tail Wings would be a good book for them, because they would understand that, no, they're not alone in suffering guilt, which can cripple us and keep us from pursuing life any further. So, I'd like to be able to think that my books would touch people in a more spiritual and emotional way, than just be an exciting story. Because, if you want to read an adventure, it'll do that. But if you want to look a little deeper at what the characters are going through, I think some people will be touched on a heartfelt level, and that's what I'd be really happy about.
And let me ask you this: would you consider either or both of these to be close to? Man, I'm looking in the chat room, and I'm telling you, James just can't quit. Anyway, do you? No, I'm gonna have to talk to him about this, but I appreciate his efforts. Would you consider either or both in the young adult category, or maybe maybe older? What do you think the general audience should be for what you've written?
Well, you know what? When I was younger, what constituted a young adult book is different from what is considered young adult today, evidently. I considered CATSEYE and the subjects I may deal with in the future in that series to be adult. Because a young adult to me is under 18. So, but for Beneath Red Tail Wings, I think anyone could read that. I think my subjects are not for, some kid 13 or 14 years old who doesn't have the maturity to understand the seriousness of what the characters are going through. But, so pretty much, I guess, in my opinion, it would be for adult readers. But there's nothing in them I don't think a 17 or 18-year-old shouldn't be able to read and, not have a problem with. I don't know. That may change in the future as I continue the CATSEYE series. I may consider some of it adults only. It just depends on what the characters do and how they express themselves.
Well, I guess, that's kind of a creative way to do it. And to set out to write a story and see where the story takes you instead of going, this is going to be definitely I want to see, teens be able to read this or whatever, is probably.
Well, I don't think I'll ever be able to write for teenagers in the sense you're talking like, say, 13 to 16-year-olds or 17-year-olds, even if if I'm being tight about it. I think my stories are always going to be for people who have finally gotten out in the world and had some experience in life. I don't think teenagers and children who are still at home and still, being guided by their parents in home life, I just don't write for kids, so to speak. I really don't. I think my perspective is adult, and that's who I expect to read my stories.
Yeah. And so you've got, let's see, the next thing on your docket is a continuation of the, Beneath CATSEYE universe. And I'm sorry, I apologize for forgetting, but about when do you think that one will be out?
Well, I'm hoping I'll be able to do that and get it completed within the next 3 months. I'm not going to promise sooner than that. 3 months.
Sure, but before the middle of next year, probably, right?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely be done before that.
Yeah, and as for the business side of it, you obviously have a publisher, and that takes a lot of the kinds of things that you have to do as a business person off the table. Is that does that free you up a little bit more to work more on the creative side because you don't have to do as much for the business side? I would imagine
definitely it does. With my publisher in charge of things, I'm able to deal with my real life things that are going on and able to dream and fantasize and think up more stories to write. I don't have to worry about, legal issues and things like that because it's all being handled, and that's a relief for me because, I find details annoying. I really am much more the dreamer than I am the let's get down to the brass tacks and take care of business type. You can get lost in all that legal stuff, and frankly, I don't have the headspace for it. My head's usually in the clouds thinking up a new story, and random things are going through my mind all day, and boy, I should write that down because it'll make a great story. Or boy, I should finish this, and so I'm all over the place. I don't have the patience, and my publisher has the patience for all the tiny little details, and that's a big help to me. It's one less thing I have to worry about. which is probably why I never self-published before, when a lot of people were saying, oh, well, you just go ahead and do that, because I didn't want to deal with the details. You know, essentially, I want to write and tell my stories and be lazy about all the rest of it.
Okay, that's one way to put it. In a week, let's take a regular week. About how many hours do you spend in the service of your creative endeavors in writing?
That depends. Some weeks I can write every day, and some weeks I don't write at all. And I might write a couple of hours one day and then write all day another day. It's all random for me. I don't have that organized, I'm going to sit down and write for 8 hours and, produce something. Because I can sit down in front of the computer and look at that blank sheet of paper for 8 hours and get nothing done. Or I can wake up in the middle of the night at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and come sit down at the computer and write a short story or write a whole passage and get it done before dawn and then go back to bed. It's just totally random for me. I don't have a structure. I just let the muse, so to speak, push me out there whenever it comes to the fore. That's it. So, sorry to all those people who sit down and actually do an 8-hour day on their novel like it's a job. I commend you, and I wish I had that, but it doesn't work for me.
Well, I mean, everybody has a different process, and what the thing that people should not get hung up on is what they read in the books. All the books about writing.
Right. I had to finally throw all the Writer's Digest and everything out because I could not make the rules work for me. I don't write that way. It's spontaneous. It's sometimes unexpected. And pretty much I like the surprises because sometimes I never know what I'm going to put on the paper.
Well, my hat's off to you. I'm the opposite because I figured out a process that really works well for me. But when I first started, I was very much like you. I was kind of a catch as catch can because I had a very busy life. So, I mean, I think everybody figures out their own process, although I have friends here in Chicago who have been writing books for years. They'll tell me, I have one friend who just had a baby, and he told me that he's been working on a novel for about 10 or 12 years now. And I said, well, what's taking you so long? Because I was curious about his process. And he said, well, I only write when the mood strikes me. And with, obviously he has a new baby now, but with his job, with, getting married and, all of the things that he was doing in his life, he was having a tough time getting to the point where he could sit down and be as creative as he can.
Right.
And, everybody does pick a different way of handling all of that. And I think that once you find what works best for you, then you got to stick with it because obviously it's working.
Well, yeah,
Go ahead.
I just have to say I've tried to be very disciplined about it, and it just doesn't happen. Nothing gets on the paper. I can walk away from the computer after 4 hours, and the paper is still white. There's nothing. I haven't managed to write anything because I didn't like what I was trying to force out of myself. I believe my characters, when they yell loud enough, then it's spontaneous out on the paper, and it's done. And once it's done, I can go back and say, oh, wow, this sounded really good. If I try to force it, I hate everything, and then I hit the delete button. So.
You're a better person than me. When I hit the delete button, it's I'm telling you right now, it hurts. It's physical. Oh, girl, I was writing my last book, my third book, in the trilogy, and I was going gangbusters. I thought, oh, this is great. And then I realized the direction I was going was not going to get to the ending that I wanted to, and I had to delete 4 chapters. And you know what? Being shot wasn't as bad as me having to delete those 4 chapters.
Okay, I got a question.
Yeah.
Why, when you saw that the story wasn't going in the direction you wanted it to, why didn't you take a chance and let the story take you where it would?
Oh, because I'm a little more structured now as a writer. And one of the things that for my process is the endings of my books are one of the most important parts of the story, because from a commercial perspective, and I write for other people to read my stuff, eventually to make money off of my writing. So
right.
I realized that the ending that I had crafted, all of my endings are the most important things. I come up with the endings first, and then I'll go ahead and, like an idiot, I'll write 500 or more pages just to get to the ending. And there's a reason why I choose the endings, because it's what people remember. People remember the ending of a book and the ending of a movie more than anything else they remember about either of those. Because when they close the book or when they walk out of the theater, they're going, oh, man, that was crap, or whatever. So it's like how I felt with Inception. When I saw them spinning the top on Inception and they went to black, I actually said out loud, and everybody laughed around me, and I was embarrassed. I said, "Oh, that's bull," and people were, and so that's the last thing that people remember, or is one of the most significant things about their reading experience or their movie-going experience.
Right, it's the end of it.
So yeah, and so when I realized that these chapters I wrote had, first of all, they took a very important part of the story off the table, and I didn't notice it right that second. And then it took a right turn. Now, normally I would go with a right turn if it was in the middle of the book, but since the endings are, and my endings are pretty good, so I had to do it. And you're right. There are times when characters will lead you in a different direction in a story, and you have to take it because it's genuine. Your mind knows that this works best because this is how the story is unfolding. But in this case, I just couldn't do it, and I had to change it. And I am telling you, like I said, I've been shot, and that was nothing compared to sitting there, and I couldn't really delete them. I wanted to delete them because that would be the manly thing to do. But I wasn't that manly. So I put them someplace else on my computer where I would not be going to look at them. And then I had to go back and, 4 chapters, that's probably the way I write, somewhere between 20 to 30,000 words. So that was a lot of words to have to dump. But that was hard. And that's a lot of damn words.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine deleting that much.
Yeah, and not that I want to ever get shot again, but damn, I don't ever want to have to delete that much work. That's a lot of work. But because I pushed it in the direction I wanted it to go, the story was a lot better, and I did pay more attention to it. So, like I said, everybody's got a different process, and everybody arrives at their completed project slightly similarly, but then also very differently, because we all craft our stories from a different place, in our heads than like our regular everyday life.
Right.
So that's what made it hard. Look, we've got we've got 2 minutes left, and I got to bring Jarvis in because he's been absent for a few weeks, and he's got a couple of things he's got to bring people up to date with. But let me do this. Let me thank you. I first of all, I thank you for doing this while you have the flu. That was above and beyond, and I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope you did too. Are you feeling okay?
Oh, yeah, I'm fine. I did enjoy the conversation. I like to talk about writing and what motivates it, and, where we get our ideas from, and how society shapes us and creates those ideas, because that writing is an expression, for me, it's an expression of all that we are but I try to put in a little bit of the hope of what we can become if we start looking beyond our prejudice and barriers we put between each other.
Yeah. No, I mean that's definitely laudable. And if younger people, I mean 20s or whatever, and read that and get inspired, there's a chance that we can change things in a generation or two. So that's a very laudable ideal to shoot for. But again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a guest. And again, doing it with the flu, that's pretty good. And I want to wish you happy holidays. Don't know if you celebrate Christmas, Kwanzaa. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm sorry, I don't know if Hanukkah's over or not because I don't pay much attention. So I want to wish everybody great holidays out there because this is the last show before the holiday. I believe we're probably not going to have a show next week unless we have, I don't know, probably not. So those of you who are looking for something to listen to, go ahead and check out our over 2 years' worth of shows podcasted either at TalkShoe or on our YouTube channel, where James Jones is very kind to take these shows, convert them, and put them up for us. I want to thank everybody who has listened this whole year. I want to thank all the people who helped make this possible, all the guests who have been here. We may not have a New Year's week show either, so this may be the last time for 2015 I'm talking to everybody. And it is fun doing the show. Even giving up my Friday nights, I do enjoy it because I enjoy all the people who are here. If Jarvis will come in, he can take us home. But I also want to ask him a few questions about brief questions about what we can look forward in 2016. So, Jarvis, what are the big things on the agenda for the coming year?
Oh man, you put me on the spot.
Damn Skippy, be ready.
I think one of the main things is the Earth Squadron film. We want to have it done by this time next year. So that's real high on the priority list. And just going back, doing some housekeeping stuff, picking up some of the goals that we wanted to do this year. Weren't able to do some of them. Just filling in the gaps with those things. And then to continue to raise money and funds and things of that nature, so to keep what we're doing going and to strengthen it. We have the site, we have the magazine, we have the radio show, we have the book series. We're working on a 3D film, kind of diversifying a little bit into toys and games for next year. So I think those are the big three things next year: animation, toys, and games, in addition to what we've already been doing.
Only just that? that and going to school. You're going to school. You got a family.
Lord will not be done with school this upcoming year within the next 5 months. It can be as early as May, but definitely sometime next year.
That's pretty cool.
That'll be a big chunk off the plate.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to admit, I mean, just doing this show's been around for what? How many years now?
I think it'll be 3 years. I think it'll be It'll be 3 years, and so it's been a blast talking to and getting to know all the different creators. I mean, people before you wouldn't. You didn't know 10 people before we started doing this. So you really didn't know that there were this many other people interested in Black science fiction. Not to mention creating Black science fiction. So it's been a great ride these last 8 years, and I want to see the site continue to grow in the organization because this year we became a nonprofit. So that and that was created so that we could take advantage of some of those benefits of being a nonprofit, but then to also have this thing carry on well past us. So if something happens to William or Jay or something, we have a framework in place for this to continue to grow for the next 50, 100 years, if not forever. So I'm really excited about the project.
Well, there you go, everybody. Now you hear it. I'm looking forward to a pretty busy next year. No, I mean, a lot of different things are going to happen. For me, I'm extremely gratified that I finished my trilogy. That was a big deal for me. And I was more relieved than I was excited because I had actually completed it. Next year, and next year I'm going to try to build a computer and 3D printer manufacturing plant here in Chicago and put together about 300 tech jobs for some of our most disadvantaged communities. And I guess I'll keep doing the show until people kick me off or until I get fired.
Damn.
Well, it could happen. They may want to go a different direction. They may want to get somebody who doesn't have the face for radio. Who knows? But I want to thank everybody for a great year. It's been a good year for me, despite everybody goes through some things. Next year, I'll tell you how I got a Volvo dealer to rebuild my transmission for $300. That is quite a story.
I want to hear about this gunshot.
Oh, you didn't know that? Oh, when I was how old was I? I was 16, and we were me and three of my buddies had pulled up to a place where we thought there was a party, where we thought we were invited, and we got out of the car, and we started walking toward the building, and then a whole bunch of shots rang out. And so we all ran, and I ran toward an alley, and I jumped over some garbage cans, and I fell down. And I tried to get up, and my leg wouldn't hold me. I had been shot in the calf. And so I looked down, and I saw, blood, and I thought, oh, maybe I scraped it on the alley wall or something like that. I tried to get up again, and I had no strength. One of my buddies was running down the alley. He looked back and saw that I couldn't get up, and he picked me up and took me. They dragged me, several blocks. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9 blocks. They kind of carried me along and got me home. And, okay, here's the bad part, and I hope my mother never hears this. But we came to the front door, and she said, "Oh, no, take him around back. We just got new carpeting. We had just gotten some new." I'm serious. And so they had to drag my ass around to the back door because she didn't want to get any blood on the carpet. And in retrospect, okay, I can understand that because I was bleeding like a stuck pig. It was pretty cool. We went to my my pediatrician. And he was doing that thing, but he pulled the bullet out. He made sure that there was no arterial or vein damage, and he sewed me up. And he was kind enough not to notify the police. So I think everything was positive, but to have been shot like that was kind of shocking. And I was shot with a .38. And so next time y'all see me in shorts, you'll see this scar on my calf, and that's where I got shot. And I'll tell you, as bad as, and of course, this is revisionist memory, not revisionist history, but revisionist memory. When I tell you that was harder deleting those chapters than it was getting over being shot in the leg.
Okay.
But that's my I got shot in Kenwood story, and. It was kind of like I was a celebrity at school too. Oh man, you got shot. Show me. No, I ain't showing you nothing. These, I'm not taking. So that was how that all happened. So anywho,
okay, cool. Well, I'm sorry, Patricia. You were being very nice not to ask, but I was kind of nosy. I was like, let me find out about this.
No, about to find out about. Well, he was in shock at the moment he was shot. That's why he doesn't remember the pain. I know that's why.
No, you're absolutely right. It didn't hurt. I mean, I didn't even notice it. I saw it, but I didn't feel anything. But I had no strength. I had no strength in my leg, so it was like it was a strange sensation. And when you're that young and someone tells you you've been shot, I remember. And here's what I thought. I said, "Oh man, I've seen people get shot in the movies and on TV all the time. They just get up and limp away." And my leg says, well, see, that's TV, you dumb son of a, so my leg was telling me, no, that's not how it is. We're not going anywhere on me. So if it hadn't been for two of my guys coming back, I mean, I don't think, we didn't see anybody chase us. I think it was just somebody shooting out a window, So
wow.
we were very lucky. And I had driven my dad's car, and that was trouble. Because then my dad said, so where's the car? Is the car back where people were shooting? And I said, yeah, it was. And so he walked down there, got in the car, and drove away because nobody's going to shoot a Japanese professorial-type guy. They were just shooting at kids. So it was lucky. It was an interesting story. It was an interesting period in my life. And so there you go.
Unfortunately,
wow, I'm surprised that didn't become a story.
Oh, Dad had words. Mom had words, but her best words were, no, take them around back. We just got new carpeting. And I'm going, I'll be goddamn, And it was beautiful. It was like it was a beautiful. Go ahead.
I don't know why you didn't actually have this written down and it became something else. It could have been expanded to a novel itself. I mean, that could have been the catalyst for all kinds of experiences. Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants me to do my autobiography because it would be more fun than the novels I write. But, I'm not sure about the statute of limitations on some of the things that I did, so I have to be very, very careful about thinking about that.
I want to check that.
Yeah. But it was beautiful yellow and beige shag carpeting, so Mom wasn't having none of that.
Well, I'm sure she didn't realize you'd been shot at first. I'm sure she thought you probably just had some kid injury, like you cut yourself or something,
Mm-hmm. Well, she felt kind of guilty about it when we were driving to the doctor. But, and she was concerned. But, yeah, you're probably right. It's like, oh, so you scraped your leg and you're going to come in and bleed on my carpet? I don't think so.
Exactly.
Not today.
All right. Well, look, I want to thank everybody who's listened to this show for this year, for the previous year and the previous year before that. The people who listen to this both live and as a podcast are one of the reasons why it's fun for me to keep going. So thank everybody who's here. Think about making a New Year's resolution to try to get 5 or 10 of your friends to check out the show for 2016. Because we could always use the people to check it out. We've got a wealth of content on the site. We've got a whole bunch of creatives that we managed to interview through the course of a year. And I want to thank everybody who supports me for doing the little bit that I do. So thank you all. And thank you, Jarvis, for giving me this opportunity.
Oh, likewise. Likewise. All right, and as always, love, peace, and hair grease. Good night.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your 2015.